Pokemon evolutions are fucking weird, so it's no surprise that I've been a fan of Pokemon for at least 20 years of my life now, and it just boggles me to think of how many ways you can evolve them. So there's no denying that there's a bajillion Pokemon in the series, and here's the official number now. But here's the thing, if you take away all the evolutions, including Mega Evolutions, G Max forms, whatever, this is how many there's only going to be. However, if we do include them, it's this number, which is fucking nuts. And also for the uninitiated, not every Pokemon evolves, nor is it as simple as it sounds. So today I'm going to make a tier list of the weirdest ones, and I'm going to include all types. All of them. So let's get the easiest one out of the way. By experience, the most common way for Pokemon to evolve is just by using them. So this mainly applies to starters, so that would be your Charmander line, your Bulbasaur line, and your Squirtle line. So that's a pretty easy one to figure out, so that's going at the top. The next most common type of way is through a stone. For example, this would be your Thunderstone, so that get you your Pikachu to evolve into a Raichu. Granted, not everyone knows which stones work on which Pokemon, but chances are you're going to figure it out eventually, and with the internet, it's not hard. So that's going up the top there as well. Next are etc. items outside of stones. So this would be ones that you normally have to trade a Pokemon with, but we'll get into trading a little bit later. So certain Pokemon like this would be Electabuzz into Electivire because he needs to hold an Electrizer to turn into that Pokemon. I do have a little bit of a grudge with that one, but I'm going to put personal bias aside, and that's going next to the stones. Now we get on to trading Pokemon. I hated this concept because I didn't have any friends that played Pokemon, nor the versions that I had. So trying to get Machoke into Machamp or Haunter into Gengar was a nightmare. But, like the last one, I'll put personal bias aside for the most part, but that's going one below. Another factor into evolution is based on Pokemon's genders. We're not going to have that conversation here. For example, to get Gallade, you have to give a male Curlier a Dawnstone. Similarly, you would have to give a female Snorunt a Dawnstone to get Frostlass. This famously applies to the Nidoran line of Pokemon. The males will go from Nidoran to Nidorino to Nidoking, while the females will go from them to Nidorina to Nidoqueen. There's also certain Pokemon that have different forms based on gender. For example, Litleo into Pyroar has two different versions, one for each gender. But it's purely cosmetic. For some, this might not be a big deal, but if you didn't have the internet back then, like me, you'd probably have a little hard time figuring it out. But since it's not that bad, I'll put it next to the trades. Something more recent now is certain Pokemon will evolve based on the region. To clarify, instead of countries, the Pokemon world is based by region. So for example, a Galarian Linoon can only evolve into an Obstagoon, as the regular one will just cap off at Linoon. Similarly, a Scyther from the Hisuian region, which would go on to be Sinnoh, only they can evolve into a Kleavor using a Black Augurite. And more recently, only a Paldean Wooper can evolve into a Clodsire, because otherwise the regular one will turn into a Quagsire. Yes, both are derpy, and I love them both. So with it being region-based, it's not that big of a deal, especially with evolutions in technology for Pokemon, where you can just trade from this game to that game to the other. It's a little long-winded, but what are you going to do? So with just the regions, that's going to go next to the trades as well. Another relatively common evolution type is based on Pokemon's friendship. Essentially, it's an arbitrary stat that affects how the Pokemon listens to you. So for example, Baneri can only transform into a Lopunny if it maxes out its friendship. The thing with Baneri though is that it starts out with 0 friendship, so you have to do whatever you can to make it evolve, which is dumb. But one that's not so bad is Woobat into Swoobat. Basically just bootleg Zubat. For some it might be a little bit weird, but that's going straight into the mid tier. Another relatively recent innovation in evolution is based on the time of day. So, for example, a Fomantis can only evolve into a Lurantis at level 34 during the day. Similarly, a Mora can evolve into an Aurorus at level 39 only during the night. Given that day to night cycles have always been a thing, they had to have an evolution type eventually. So I'm going to I'll put that with the trades as well. It's okay, but it might be a little hard to figure out for some people. Something a little bit more obscure is by location. For example, Gold Eevee. As of Generation 4, so that'd be Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum, it would gain 2 more evolutions, Leafeon and Glaceon. Even though you can use the respective stones, Leaf and Ice, there are certain ways to get around it as well. If you level up near a mossy rock, it will turn into a Leafeon. If you level up an Eevee near an icy rock, it will turn into a Glaceon. Given how specific some of these might be, I would say it's pretty obscure, so that's going one below mid. Another happening as of Generation 4 was learning specific types of move, namely Piloswine to Mamoswine. It can only evolve once it learns Ancient Power. Similarly, Dunsparce gained the much needed evolution of Dudunsparce once it learns Hyper Drill. Even though these moves might not be practical for said Pokemon, it is cool to know that this is a thing. So I would say I put that at the mid tier as well. It's one thing to learn moves, it's another to actually use them. This was innovated in Pokemon Legends Arceus, easily one of the best games in the series. So for example with this one, only Hisui and Quillfish can evolve into Overquill, badass name by the way, if it uses Barb Barrage 20 times, but only in Strong Style. Similarly, in Generation 8, a Primeape can evolve into the badass Annihilape if it uses Rage Fist 20 times. No style involved. While it is pretty obscure, it's cool to use new moves, especially ones that you wouldn't normally for said Pokemon. Given with Primeape, it's a Ghost type move being used by a Fighting type. That being said though, yeah, I'd say that's mid tier as well. Now for the last common type of evolution, walking so many steps with the Pokemon out of its ball. This would only be an innovation as of the latest game, Scarlet and Violet, so this only applies to Rellor into Rabsca, Pormo into Pormit, and Bramblin into Bramblegast. It may not be the most obvious thing so far, but there's worse. So yeah, I'd say that's just above mid. Now we get to the weird ones, starting with Eevee into Sylveon. So as of Generation 6, the Fairy type was added, which I'm still getting used to. I am an old head, so to start, Eevee would have to learn a Fairy type move. Examples up here. But only between Generation 6 and 7, so from Pokemon X and Y up until the Ultra Sun and Moon games, they would have to gain an affection of at least 2 hearts. The way this is done is through unique mechanics in those games, which I never would have used outside of trying to get my Sylveon. But following Sword and Shield, it would only be reduced to High Friendship, akin to Baneri, as I said before. Even though it did change eventually, I'm going to stick with the old way of doing it, and I'm going to put it one below mid. It's a little weird, but, it gets you to use a feature you wouldn't have used otherwise. Now we get onto a pretty famous one, Wurmple into either Cascoon or Silcoon. Both required to be evolved at level 7, but here's the thing. It's random. Even my favourite YouTuber Chugga Conroy has debunked this. Take it away.
Not dependent on gender, but on personality value. Gender is only one of 4 integers that make up a Pokemon's personality value. This is a 32-bit value between 0 and 4,294,967,295, represented in binary that was introduced in Generation 3, one generation after gender was implemented for Pokemon of the Nidoran. Breaking down how this works, Wurmple's evolution depends on the last 2 bytes of this integer, only one of which decides the Pokemon's gender. It is determined by taking these numbers combined between the 2 bytes of memory, dividing them by 10, and seeing if the remainder is more or less than 5. If the remainder is less than 5, you get a Silcoon. If it is equal to or greater than 5, you get a Cascoon. There's many players guys floating around out there that have this detail wrong, so I can understand why you would think otherwise, but if you're going to try to correct me, please make sure you have your facts straight before you do. Otherwise, I can and will nerd out on you.
Thank you, Chugga. The fact that it's random chance which one you get makes it really, really crap. That's going right at the bottom. Next, Nincada into Shedinja. Normally evolving a Nincada would take it into Ninjask at level 20. However, if you have at least 1 Pokeball in your bag and 1 space spare in your party, you will get Shedinja. As much as I hate that busted piece of shit, I'd say that goes into the mid tier. It's not obvious, but chances are if you get an early game, you'll find it pretty easy. Staying with the somewhat classic Pokemon, Mantike into Mantine. Let's see if you can figure it out first. Have a look at Mantine. You see anything there? Yeah, just there. That's a Remoraid. So to get your Mantine, you need to have a Mantike in your party, as well as a Remoraid. Given that you probably won't have either in your party at the same time, I'd say it's kind of weird. So that's one above bottom as well. Next I'm going to go for a bit of a double whammy. Carablast and Shelmet into Escavalier and Excelgor respectively. What you have to do is trade a Carablast with a Shelmet, or vice versa, to get the respective Pokemon. So either way, I'd say that's a middle tier. Next one, Pancham into Pangoro. Similar to Mantike, to get Pancham to evolve, you need it at least level 32 with at least one Dark type in your party. It could be any one. Despite it just being bootleg Ursaring, I'd say that's a pretty cool way of evolving a Pokemon, because it's based on its type, so it corrupts the Pancham. So I'd say that's one above mid. And now we're on to the whole reason why I wanted to make this video. Inkay into Malamar. This is the moment I realized that we need to think outside the box for evolutions. So how do you get him to evolve? You get your Inkay to at least level 30, and as it's about to level up, you turn your system upside down. And then you get Malamar. At the time, I thought that was such a friggin' cool idea. And it made me think of what you could do in other ways to evolve Pokemon. So I'd say that's obscure but cool. Next one we go to is a bit of a questionable one. Sliggoo into Goodra. A lot of people would just assume you just level it up, as you would with the other pseudo-legendaries. But there is a catch. To get your Sliggoo into Goodra, you have to get it to at least level 50 and level up while it's raining. This bit of a specific detail probably would go unnoticed, to first-time players at least. So I'd say that's just above mid as well. And now, one of the worst ones in my opinion. Rockruff into Dusk Lycanroc. So there's already two versions of Lycanroc, Midday and Midnight. There is a caveat though. As of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, it got a third one, Dusk. Unlike the other versions of Lycanroc, this one is very, very specific. Your Rockruff in question needs to have specifically own tempo as its ability, and it can only be evolved during the evening. As far as I know, that's only between 5 and 8 PM, so you can very easily miss your chance to get your Dusk Lycanroc. That alone, that puts it just below bottom. Now one that makes a little bit more sense. Cosmo M into either Solgaleo or Lunala. It may well just be evolution, but it's only based on your game. If you have Ultra Sun, it will only evolve into a Solgaleo, but only in Ultra Moon, it will be a Lunala. Well, this does make sense because you can get the respective Pokemon in their games, you can get another one so you can trade with someone else, which I think is a pretty cool thing. That alone, that's just above mid. And now for a slightly controversial one. Meltan into Melmetal. For those who have only played Pokemon GO, you know how you evolve Pokemon. Candy. The problem I have with that is that Meltan is only available in Pokemon GO, so with that alone, I'd say that's mid. I'll be clear with it. Now let's get unique. Milcery into Alcremie. This is probably one of the most ingenious ones in my opinion. The way you get it to evolve is you give it some spin. As simple as it sounds, there are many palette swaps of Alcremie, but I'm not going to go into that today. Instead, I'll have this video here so you can see the general reaction of getting an Alcremie.
Bring you back to Pokemon Sword! In the last what's happening? Excuse me?
Yeah, pretty cool, isn't it? So that alone, that's obscure but cool. And now, one of the weirder ones. Galarian Farfetch'd into Sirfetch'd. Given that the regular Farfetch doesn't evolve, that's already a bit of a candidate for a lower ranking one. But here's why this is going to rank very low. Surfetched isn't based on level or item specifically. Rather, you have to get 3 critical hits in one battle. Under normal circumstances, this is extremely hard to do. Because 1, critical hits do a lot of damage, 2, they're hard to get without cheating, and 3, how would you ever know this? Given that though, Surfetch looks pretty damn cool. But that's not going to save it. That's going right at the bottom. Another very low ranking one for me is Galarian Yamask into Runerigus. This is unbelievably obscure. Similarly with Galarian Farfetch'd, it's not based on level. You'll need to have taken at least 49 points of damage, then go to Under the Arch of the Dusty Bowl. Again, how the fuck would you ever know? Right at the bottom, no questions asked. Now for a slightly more sane one. Toxel into Toxtricity. So what did I put 2 there? Very good question. Which one you get, whether it's high key or amped, is based on its nature. And here's the natures that you need to get the respective Toxtricity. While it's not exactly impossible to get, knowing which one you're going to want is pretty hard to understand, especially if you don't pay attention to natures. So I'd say that's kind of middling. With that one out of the way, we're going to go back to weird. Ursaring into Ursaluna. This has got to be one of the most obscure, specific things you need to do to evolve a Pokemon. First off, you need a Peat block. Pretty easy to find in the game. But that's not all. Specifically, you have to evolve your Ursaring with the Peat block on a full moon. That is just parody levels of obscure. So, right at the bottom, I may be biased. I know another one about the same level as Galarian Yamask. Hisuian Basculin into Basculegion. So the only difference here is that instead of 49 damage, it needs to take 294 in recall damage. So that would be moves from like Takedown or Double Edge. There is no way you would have known without looking it up. Bottom. And now, probably one of the worst ones in my opinion. Bishop into the sadly overpowered King Gambit. So why am I saying sadly overpowered? It's how it evolves. So let's take everything we've learned so far. Let's scrap that. So to get your King Gambit, you have to use your Bishop to take out 3 other Bishop, specifically leading hordes of Pawniard. How? How do you screw this up so bad? King Gambit is such a good Pokemon. And you screw it up. Thankfully, the last few are a little more sane. Thank you. Starting with Tandemaus into the Family of 4 version of Mousehold. So both versions only require to be level 25. But here's a little random chance here for you. Remember Dudunsparce? Well, that also has another form. The 3-bodied one compared to the 2. So similarly with Mousehold having 3 or 4, it's random chance. Again, both are purely cosmetic. So that's just above mid. And now we get to a pretty decent one, I'd say. Finizen into Palafin. Now I bet you're thinking, there's no difference with this one. Better? So to get your Palafin, all you need to do is get to level 38 or over while you're playing online. With Scarlet and Violet being the first openly online multiplayer Pokemon game, I think it's a really cool way to get a Pokemon to evolve. So, why not? Just above mid. And finally, Gimmighoul into Goldengo. So throughout Scarlet and Violet, you'll find Gimmighoul outside of its box, just looking around, exploring. and when you find one, it'll give you a set amount of coins. I bet you can see where I'm going with this. So to get your precious Goldengo, you need 999. I'm not even joking. But thankfully, once you find all your Gimmighoul, they will reset. Should you want to try and get another one? To that I say nope. But at the same time, I'd say that's mid. It's just obnoxious. So now, here's the final tier list. What do you guys think? Did I miss any? Or was I slightly wrong on some? Just let me know in the comments. Either way, this has been Brodus Dooman. I'll see you later.